Hello and welcome to Hull Noir's August 3 Book Friday. I'm Nick Triplow, writer and co-founder of Hull Noir, and with me is fellow writer and Hull Noir co-founder Nick Quantrill, and we'll be asking our guests to talk about 3 books with us this evening that have most influenced them as writers and readers and discuss what makes them must-reads. So the format is quite straightforward. So we've got a book that was given to each of our guests, a book that they'd give to somebody else or recommend, and a book that's influenced them as writers. So what we'd like you to do, if you do like the video, then please press the like button. And if you want to subscribe to the channel and find out when we're doing something else ridiculous later on down the line, then please do. So I'm going to hand over to Nick to introduce our guest for this evening.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. So yes, I think our 2 guests this evening need a little introduction to the crime fiction community out there. And we have Cleeves with us tonight, and is the author behind ITV's Vera and BBC One's Shetland, 2 series loved by readers around the world and viewers. She's the author of over 25 novels, and the latest, The Heron's Cry, featuring Detective Matthew Venice, published 2nd of September. So that's exciting, man. New book on the way. And our second guest is Derek Farrell. Derek is the author of the Danny Baird series published by Fahrenheit Press, a series described as being like MC beaten on MDMA, which is quite the description, isn't it, really? So Death at Duke Holt, the 5th book in this series, was published in July. So welcome both. It's great to have you along. Let's start with you, Anne. Let's start with the favourite book that you was given. And you've chosen a contemporary crime novel, and one that has been on my list for quite a while. It's The Last Crossing by Brian McGilloway. And I think it's had more than one life, hasn't it, effectively? It's kind of been around for a little while, but it's finally getting some recognition, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those books that publishers didn't want to publish. Brian's been a great writer, I think, for a long time. I love his the name's Ben Devlin books that are set around the borderlands of Northern Ireland and the Republic. And this was something quite different. And it was given to me actually by Brian when he was at his lowest and he couldn't find a publisher for it. And publishers were saying, oh, nobody's interested in Ireland, nobody's interested in the Troubles. We don't want to know, go away. And you're a great writer, but go away and write about something else. And this was a book that was so close to his heart and so brilliantly written. And it's not really a crime book. It's a book about betrayal and love and growing up. And the premise is that the politicians have been told to show families where the disappeared are buried. And so this couple go across to, or this group of people with the politician goes across to Scotland, which is where somebody's been buried during the Troubles. And that starts it off. And it's such a powerful novel. And I've sent it to people who live in the North, but also who know about politics and education in a way that I don't. And we all think it should be required reading for every politician and every sixth former. And Brian's just a brilliant guy. He's a teacher and he's one of the kindest people I've ever met. And when he gave me this book, he'd recently lost his father and I'd not long lost my husband. And we sat eating pizza, both of us in floods of tears, talking about this book. So it's something that's really, really close to my heart. But then it did get a new lease of life because in the end, you sort of think that quality will fight through. And he got a new agent who believed in it so much that he actually published it. So David Headley published it, and now it's got picked up by a mainstream publisher.
Yeah, and it was also highly commended for the Dixon Award this year as well, wasn't it? Which is kind of hopefully the kind of boost that it will really kind of kick that book into a wider audience.
And I think crime writers, because we're quite a close community, got behind it. So, if Ian Rankin says everybody ought to read this book, and tweets about it, people kind of take a bit of notice.
Yeah. I read the first few pages on Amazon this afternoon, as I was saying, and it's one of the most impactful openings I think I've read in a long, long time, and just draws you in a way, as you say. It doesn't feel just like a crime novel. It feels like it's a novel that's going to change the way you think about things, and from half a dozen pages, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's not just about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It's about we do what we have to do, and how we care about people, and how sometimes we have to betray them, and how we carry that guilt with us. It's a very, very grown-up novel, I think.
Yeah. Is it a novel you've read, Eric? Is it on your radar?
I know of it, but now it's another one of those ones that's on my ever-growing list of things. It sounds right up my street. And Anne's point about publishers saying no one's interested in Ireland, no one's interested in the Troubles. It's sad, because if you live through them, you are. From a marketing perspective, the world may have moved on, but a book like that, I think, is needed, because there's still, the history isn't history. It's still present. It's still ongoing, and it has impacted so many people. Yeah. I think books like this need to be written and need to exist.
Yeah,
and it was about that time, I think, when he was struggling to get a publisher, that the young journalist got killed. You know, in I can't remember, Leah, I think, or Lyra.
Lyra, wasn't it?
Yeah, just so sad, and so present, and that history is still being lived with by all sorts. But it's important for us as well, who live in the mainland, to understand what's going on.
It's what crime fiction does well, isn't it? It kind of opens up these windows into worlds that we wouldn't necessarily experience, isn't it? And this is a really important one that we need to consider, and especially with the political climate as it is, it's something that we should all be thinking about. As you say, it's a book for readers, isn't it? And it's a book for everybody to press upon other people, and empathy, I suppose, is the word, isn't it? Really.
It's
also about the corrupting influence of party politics, I think.
Yeah. So your choice.
One of the things about crime novels, though, is that it's such a massively broad church. You've got the pure entertainments, which I love a cozy, I love pure entertainment. But then you've got the ones that go almost like deep into sort of psychological, sounds like a psych thriller, but you know what I mean. These are explorations of the human condition. They go so much deeper into, as you said, and what it means to be human, and what it means, the fact that being human means at some point there will be disappointments, and you will be the one disappointing, and at times betraying other people. And how do we live with that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think your choice, Derek, is probably more what we'd call a young adult novel, I guess. From looking it up, it's Yes at School by Anthony Goddard. It wasn't a book I was familiar with, but it sounds like something I'd want to give to my daughter to read, because it sounds like a great kind of adventure story, kind of a romp, I guess.
It is, and I took it from the phrasing, a book I was given, and as a kid I was a pretty I was entirely solitary. I'm one of two boys. My neighbors thought my brother was an only child, because they never, genuinely, seriously, years after I'd left home, the neighbors were shocked to discover, some of the neighbors were shocked to discover I'd even existed, because I went to school, I came home, I sat in my room, I read. And my dad, from a very early age, I think I was about 3, my dad loved books and he loved libraries. So we would go to the local library twice a week. And he'd go into the adult section, I'd go into the junior section. By the time I was 9, like, the librarian was one of my best friends, and it was the librarian who gave me this book. And it's called The Aztec Skull. It's by Anthony Goddard. It's about, it ticked all my boxes. It's about a young girl who escapes from a care home and is looking for somewhere to hide. And she finds an isolated house miles from anywhere, completely unseeable from the road. She breaks in and discovers it seems to be uninhabited, so she basically moves in. She quickly discovers in the basement a secret room, which is basically filled with Aztec artifacts that the owner of the house has looted from Mexico over years. And then a boy discovers her, but he has secrets of his own, so he doesn't dob her in. And then the Mexican villagers from whom all the artifacts were stolen turns up, and it goes haywire. And as a kid, it was magic. I borrowed this book, but I was talking to my dad last week. I borrowed this book 9 times from the library. We couldn't buy it because back in those days in Dublin, there were lots of bookshops, but the idea of going in and ordering something that wasn't on the shelf just was to us was alien, that wasn't stocked in the shops. And eventually I grew up, I moved on, and then years later, I was like, I want that book. Couldn't be found anywhere. So there are moments when buying books on the internet is a joyful thing because I found it. It's very, I've read it about 4 times since as an adult. There are aspects of it that are dated. The Mexican villains are drawn so badly that the author would be cancelled today. Yeah, we've got to acknowledge it's very politically incorrect. They're sort of superstitious, mustache twirling villains, which is really wouldn't work today, wouldn't be acceptable. But as a child, a sort of an isolated, lonely, though I didn't necessarily know I was child, it ticked all my boxes. It was adventure, it was self-sufficiency, and it just mattered a lot to me. So, you know, when I look back, I've been given so many books over the years, and I think for every single one of these choices, for the ones I've picked, there was probably 100 or 200 I could have picked.
Yeah.
But this one just means a lot to me. It's since the day I managed to find it, it's been on my bookcase, and it will go when they turf my collection on my death.
Fantastic. I'm guessing it's not a book you're familiar with, Anne, given what Derek said about how
No,
difficult
not
it was
at all.
to find.
But I am familiar with that ritual of going to the library. Because my dad was a teacher, but we had very few books that we owned in the house because little village school teachers didn't earn much in the late 50s, early 60s. So it was Saturday, go to the library. And I still remember I was into mysteries even then. You know, I was an Enid Blyton child, moved on quite quickly because I realized that she wasn't that brilliant a writer, but that magic. And I still remember the name of the librarian, don't remember any names of my teachers, but Mrs. Gregory, who would save me if there was a kid's mystery book, would save them for me and would bring them out from behind the counter, you know, like magic, like a magician bringing a rabbit out of a hat, and just such a wonderful. And then you'd have read it by the time you'd walked home, because
that's always a problem, isn't it?
In the spirit of Mrs. Gregory, can you tell us about the book that you'd recommend to us if we were to walk into your library?
Oh goodness, a child's book, you mean? No, I would go, if we're talking about books for kids, I would think.
Yeah, so you went to The Girl in the Green Dress.
Sorry? The one that, the next one.
Sorry.
Just hadn't realised we've moved on. Yeah, Kath Staincliffe, The Girl in the Green Dress. And this, I love Kath Staincliffe's books. She's another of those authors who I think needs to be better known, and publishers ought to get behind her. And one of those authors that are stuck with the label mid-list and aren't given the marketing spend, and possibly because she doesn't write series. She has this an idea or a premise. So she wrote The Silence Between Breaths about looking at a terrorist who rides on a train from Manchester to London, and it's not just told from the passenger's point of view, but from the terrorist and his family's point of view. And we really get a sort of insight into that fear that lingers afterwards. But this is The Girl with the Green Dress, and the girl with the green dress is a transgender teenage girl, and it's about her murder. Kath understands this because she's got a trans child, so she's lived it and knows about some of the prejudice. But it's just such a good novel. It's, in a way, it's a classic police procedural, because we're working with the police to work out who killed this girl. And the ending is kind of hopeful and sad. And I can remember absolutely reading the ending because I was at an American BoucherCon and just sitting outside in the sun with tears, again, crying at the ending of this. I was on my own just because it was so moving. So yeah, that's one that I would pass on and recommend and do all the time.
Is that a book you've read, Derek? Have you come across that?
I actually have it. but I haven't gotten to it yet. This is the challenge with things like this. There's so much good stuff out there at the moment.
There is.
But I know I've been caught before where stuff has gone out of print, and then I've been like, damn, I should have bought it when I got it. So I have a list of books where I'm like, you know what, it's on the shelf. I don't care if it takes me 5 or 10 years to get to it. I've got it, which is the thing that counts. But it's something I'd like. I'm hopeful that I'll get to in the next couple of months because you've sold it.
Yeah.
Good. No, I just think it's a real pacey thriller, but it's non-judgmental. It's not preachy. You know, it doesn't take a specific point of view and fight for it particularly. Most of it is told from the point of view of the girl's dad, but also from the parents of the teenage bullies, and so we understand a bit about what's going on in that family and what's led to that crazy aggressive phobia as well.
Yeah, I think like you said about Brian's. I was saying, I think what I was saying about Brian's book about being like a kind of like a grown-up novel, effectively. It's the same with Castle Kings. They're very complex novels, Cass booked. And it's difficult to understand why she hasn't broken out, like you said, despite the fact that CV is incredible, isn't it? She's had work on TV, she's written for TV.
She created Blue Murder with Carolyn Quentin. She's written radio plays that have won awards, and still there is no publisher prepared to put the money that's needed to just boost her to another level. And I get so frustrated, you know, with this mantra that publishers are always going on about, you know, that marketing spend follows sales, which is, you know, completely counterintuitive, because if you don't put a little bit of money behind an author, an established mid-list author, then they're not going to sell. It's a business. People need to know about the books that are out there, and no matter how much self-promotion you do and social media you do, you need a publisher behind you to actually get it sold.
Yeah. Derek, your choice, another a writer with a publisher behind her, albeit in a quite a punkish indie kind of way.
Anyway, my choice is Dead is Better by Joe Perry.
Great title.
I adore this book. I mean, I adore this book so much I blurbed it, and the blurb I gave it was, it's like a noir novel by Samuel Beckett. Which it absolutely is. I mean, you can see the book, it's slim, it's like 150 pages. And the concept behind it is Charlie Stone wakes up, he's dead. He knows he's dead because he can see the 2 bullet holes in his chest. He can see the living world, but in no way interact. The only other being that appears to acknowledge him and be able to interact with him is a dead red setter dog. So there's a man and a dog, they're both dead. You imagine straight from the off, this is going to be about Charlie Stone investigating his own murder. And without spoiling it too much, it's not, because it was an accidental death. You know, the tragedy of the fact that his life was unremarkable, his death was an accidental death, unremarkable, nothing to be seen, nothing to be gained. There is a crime, and there is an attempt by Charlie and the silent red setter dog to try and understand the roots of the crime and to stop what's going on. It's a book that's it. You explain it that way, and people who like a nice mystery will enjoy that. But then you mentioned the fact that it's also about somebody who didn't like himself in life, learning a little more to like himself after the fact. It's really human, and it's really universal, and it's about grief and loss, and realizing and I'm tearing up thinking about it, realizing the chances you've missed and that you've missed them too late. And also, and you know, despite the fact he's dead, to all intents and purposes, he's alive, because he's realized the chances he's missed, and he's trying his best to put things right and to make up for the mistakes he's made. It's brilliant. Every little chapter opens with a quote from somebody about death. So, you know, there are Tolkien, death is just another path, one that we all must take. If you only wanted it to read the epigrams on the front of each chapter, it's a fabulous pastime that way as well. It's a book I cannot speak highly enough about. I have recommended it and I've gifted it to, as I say, friends who like mysteries, friends who don't like mysteries, friends who like dogs, friends who don't like dogs, people who read, people who don't read, because it's a slim volume, so it's not going to make anyone think you've given me Lord of the Rings. What am I supposed to do with this? It's quality rather than quantity, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I love this book. And you're absolutely right. And the reality is, you know, Joe Perry's background, she wrote for TV in the US. She's a network TV writer. She was a poet. That all shows in this book because, and I speak as somebody who is regularly told by my editor, we need to start trimming some words. There isn't a wasted word in this book. It's slim, it's poetic. And, you know, one of these days, it will be recognized as a hugely important book. It's just beautiful. I can't praise it enough.
Cheers, thanks, Derek. That sounds
I've never heard of it, which is really sad. So I will go out and look for it.
I will get you a copy.
That's very kind. No, I will. I'll pay for a copy. We need to. That was something that the rep that I first worked with when I was first published. The one bit of advice: never give a copy to someone who would pay for it.
Yeah,
which is sensible because lots of authors do give their comps away to people who would actually pay for them, and it might make a bit of difference.
Yeah, no, I think it goes to that point as well. You were saying about publishers, don't it? And that it's published by Fahrenheit Press, which is an indie press, but we're rich readers out for having these kind of different size publishers available to us. You know, and it's
absolutely
horses for courses, isn't it? I suppose in that sense. You know, maybe that's not a book that'll be picked up by a major publisher because it's a dead man and a dog kind of doing the investigation, but we'd have lost that story otherwise.
Absolutely, I think that's one of the joys of the smaller indie presses is that they're less concerned necessarily with what box it will fit into. I mean, full disclosure, I'm on the same indie press, and when they actually responded to my initial submission for my first book, they said point blank, we have absolutely no idea what market this fits into, but we love it so much we want to have it. And to your point, Anne, that's not going to get past an editorial meeting at any of the big fives.
No, it's not.
So,
it's sad, but great that they're there. And sometimes it's lovely when small presses do so well, and they, you know, like is it Graham McRae Burnett, who was longlisted for the Booker and then shortlisted for the Booker, which was just fabulous. He was with amazing.
Yeah, it happens, doesn't it? So our third category tonight is a book that's influenced your own writing directly. So we'll let you cheat a little bit, didn't we, Anne? Because you'll have a series of books.
Yeah.
You picked the George Simenon book, the Margrave series. So
yeah, any of Maigret really, because it was what Derek was saying about not one wasted word. He writes so tightly, and I always recommend his books to people who've just started writing crime, because in one sentence he'll describe a character, you'll have a sense of the place, and he'll move the plot on just in one sentence. And that ability to be so tight and spare in your writing, I think is amazing. And not everybody wants to do that. You know, we need overblown and we need lots of words too, but to be able to do that is really special.
What about you, Derek? Are you a fan? I'm guessing you might be from your work.
I love Simenon and I love Maigret. And you're absolutely right. And it's that sort of stuff where you read it and you think, oh, this is simple, this is easy, this is simple, and then you try and do it and you're like, how the hell did, you know, it's that Winston Churchill quote, I think it's a Churchill quote about, I'm sorry this missive is so long, I would have made it shorter if I had more time.
Yeah.
Because
they are, again, like your book, just very slim and very slender, but at the end, and he is so compassionate. And I can't remember whether it was Maigret himself or Simenon talking about Maigret, that his role is to understand, not to judge. And so you do get that sense of somebody who's compassionate, who isn't judging. And I think I spoke to Simenon's son, who said that he thought that his father had turned Maigret into a sort of priest who's taking confession. And you can kind of get that too, can't you, when you read
And
it?
that's, yeah, and the thing is, that's even more impressive when you think of the period during which it's been written. They're very, very contemporary in that respect, that they present a scenario and they show you what's happening, and that's it. There is no attempt to have a black hat and a white hat to solve the thing. But you know, in the sort of the period of time when they were being written, the temptation to go much more towards the genre tropes and to just do an entertainment that would tie everything up neatly and squarely at the end. Although he does tie things up, there's never a moment in a Simenon where you get to the end and go, but what happened
with that? Yeah, no, absolutely. He does it effortlessly. And when you see how many books he's written, which is why I couldn't choose one, because just dozens of them, and they're all different and they're set in different places, and you don't actually get confused with them because each one is unique.
He's one of those authors. I'd love to see the drafts. I want to know, is it always that tight? Or does it begin going off and then pull it at one point? Because I'm guessing by the end, he was a machine, because he knew exactly what his style was.
What he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once he started turning them out in maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time at his peak, he could kind of draft a novel in that sort of short period of time, which is.
But you don't get the sense of them being churned out and one idea repeated over and over again. Each one is, it's set, set by a canal, or it's Maigret on holiday in Deauville or somewhere. It's just brilliantly done.
They're also, despite the fact that, as you say, it might be the entirety of Deauville, he's so good at creating a claustrophobic space. There's no random unnecessary characters. There'll be a minimum cast, and every single line has value. Every single character has a purpose. They're not just there to add color.
Yeah. Do you both think that maybe your appreciation of him has deepened as you become more and more successful writers? You've written more and more novels. Does that kind of change your perception of him? Because obviously you started picking his books when you was kind of pre-writing effectively. So is that kind of something that changed over time, your appreciation of him?
I think I read him just for the story to start with. I certainly he was the first translated writer I ever read, and I am passionate about crime fiction in translation and have been since then, and read them just for the story and because I love them. But yeah, as I started writing, you just appreciate the skill that's in the telling.
Absolutely. I think that's particularly in this section, a book that's inspired your writing. I'd argue every book, even the terrible ones, inspires your writing. But when you start with something that you love, whether it's Simenon or people like Lawrence Bloch, Agatha Christie, whatever, the things that you love, you enjoy instinctively. The intellect comes in once you start writing and you realize this is harder than I thought it was. And then you start trying to figure out how they did the things that you loved. And that's when you realize that the sheer talent and effort that has to have gone into some of these books to make them appear so effortless.
So what's your choice?
Yeah.
Mine is, again, I could have picked a million. I look like I'm one of these people who's deliberately gone for the more obscure stuff, which I have.
They're the ones that need the promotion, so absolutely go for it.
Well, this one is called My Blue Heaven, and it's by a guy called Joe Keenan. Joe Keenan wrote, to date, 3 novels and a Broadway musical, and then became a writer, showrunner, and eventual executive producer on Frasier during the golden years. And I've described this one to friends in the past as like P.G. Wodehouse, but without the slightly fascist overtones. So it's basically, it's almost impossible to describe it. I'll read it back. When Gilbert Selwyn, ex-boyfriend of Philip Kavanagh, suddenly decides to marry Moira Finch, previously thought of as the most mercenary, cold-blooded bundle of affectations. Nobody can believe it. Put bluntly, they're doing it for the wedding presents. Because Gilbert's mother has just married into a family that are absolutely loaded. So they bring Philip along as a co-conspirator to be the best man. And it's Philip who discovers that this loaded family is basically the mafia, and that they're about to try and pull off a scam on one of the most vicious mafia families in America. And things just go worse and worse and worse. And it's a book that I've read numerous times and have laughed till I literally have to use my Ventolin. It's incredibly funny. It's incredibly sharply plotted. I mean, every single chapter ratcheted up, ratcheted up, ratcheted up. It's ridiculously over the top, but miraculously, he manages to keep it believable right up to the finale, where he basically lets loose with, you know, automatic machine guns and smoke machines and cannons, and everything goes off. I think it's inspired my writing, particularly with the Dannys, because there's a lot of humor in the Danny novels. I love well-plotted novels, by which I mean tightly plotted, back to the Seminoles. A novel with great characters where there are vast tracts of nothing going on doesn't work for me. I can understand the value of them, but I like a plot. I like a story that's moving it forward. And I just really like the fact that he wrote something in sort of 1989, which is when I first read it, that again wasn't particularly popular, wasn't particularly well received. But also for those of us who are early in our careers, just nice to think you might end up writing something completely different to the novels, but there is a world of opportunities in writing. You just have to keep writing and keep chipping, or those opportunities will never happen anyway, because you'll be out of the game. But I love this book, and it inspired me by showing me that you can take plots, you can take humor, you can take slight elements of surreality if you want to. There's no one blueprint that says this is a book and this is not a book. That's why I chose that one. It's still in print, which is great news.
Yeah, because I need to buy a copy of this, I think, now. It sounds a bit like almost like an Elmore Neville's, Elmore Leonard style sort of novel, you know, that kind of a caper, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, it's a proper caper. It genuinely is. There's a, Moira has got a mother who's like the Duchess of Devonshire or something, and the moment I was sold was when she turns up and she's described as being like a 4'3" version of Hermione Gingold. And most people don't know who Hermione Gingold is, but I knew, and I saw it immediately. So yeah, it's a caper. It's very, if you like Elmore Leonard, you'll like this. It's slightly camper, and I use that word advisedly. But it's just as tight in the plotting, the characterizations, and the general hysteria. The hysteria sort of bubbles along until a third of the way through, and then it begins to, once they twig that they're in the middle of trying to rip off the mafia, it goes into overload.
Fantastic. Is it a book you've come across before, Ron?
No, never. Another one. But I think that what this conversation has shown, just the range of crime fiction that's available. And of all genre fiction, I think that we're lucky because we can have that real sort of serious stuff like The Last Crossing to a caper that is equally well written and equally well respected, but just very, very different.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that is a fine point to end on, isn't it? So thank you very much for joining us as ever. So The Heron's Cry by Cleeves is out 2nd of September, so that's one to look forward to. And your latest one, Derek, F.F. Duke-Toll, the 5th Unprepared novel, is out now. So fill your boots, everybody. We'll be back next month with more book chat. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.